Welcome to the Mindful Healers podcast with Dr. Jessie Mahoney.
And Dr. Ni-Cheng Liang.
We are physicians and leaders who are also trained in coaching, yoga, mindfulness, and integrative medicine.
We are also mothers, spouses, sisters, daughters, aunts, and friends.
In this podcast, we share candid, heart-centered, loving, science-based, thoughtful, and often fun conversations about the challenges life throws at us.
With our collective experience of over 30 years in physician and personal wellness, we reflect and offer pearls of wisdom for navigating life's challenges with more ease.
From parenting, marriages, money scarcity, cancer survivorship, uncertainty, challenges in practicing medicine, we cover it all.
We invite you to refresh your perspective and empower yourself with mindset, mindfulness, and other well-being tools that actually work. A quick reminder that nothing in our podcast is medical advice. Welcome to our episode on lessons from family gatherings, how to navigate those gatherings with ease. Are you feeling a bit of anxiety or nervous, anticipatory energy, or maybe even unease or dread about upcoming family gatherings? Are there potential or recurrent disagreements or points of contention that often arise or unexpectedly arise when spending time with loved ones?
Do you sometimes feel like an outsider or disconnected at family gatherings? Are holidays much better now than they ever have been? And maybe you're still somewhat disappointed after family gatherings.
The intention of this episode is to provide some helpful invitations to help you navigate the holiday season and really anytime you're going to be encountering family gatherings with overall less stress and more ease and connection.
Takeaways from our conversation today are an invitation to allow whatever feelings arise, whether they be disappointment, not belonging, anger, contentment, and potentially the duality of good and bad feelings and better than ever and still not what you hoped.
So, right off the bat, I want to normalize and remind everyone of the fact that we are human and we have human needs. We are not expected to stomach or repress or suppress strong feelings, uncomfortable emotions, or thoughts. And we also deserve care as well. So we hope that you will be encouraged to show up authentically, including all of your human needs and honoring them. So, with that, I invite you to take a pause to settle in and be open for this episode. If it's safe for you to do so, inviting you to close eyes or lower your gaze a few inches in front of you, noticing the support of whatever you're sitting on or the ground beneath your feet, allowing the brain and the body to catch up with each other, letting the mind and the body be here at the same place, same time. Acknowledging that, as I mentioned, mind and body, that equates to you as a whole human being with important human needs. That should be prioritized. And with that, and blinking open eyes, letting the light back in. Thanks for practicing.
Now, as we begin, I want to reflect on this concept of prioritizing ourselves versus including ourselves in the circle of care. And while some people I find are relatively able to jump in with ease to this idea of prioritizing themselves. Other people have to start with caring for themselves as well. And so an encouragement around family gatherings to meet yourself where you are. And if you are able to jump into prioritizing you and taking care of you in that language to take care of everyone else, and or can you just make sure that you also get to enjoy and have fun and participate and have your own human needs met, and stepping out of the constant giving that most of us are and practice receiving, which is a balance. So many of us at family gatherings are the givers and the planners and the organizers, and we don't receive, but we're also not available for receiving because we're not comfortable with it. It's something that's very unfamiliar. And this is something that has come up for me. And so the juxtaposition that I wanted to talk about, and funnily enough, we were going to record this episode before Thanksgiving with our learnings from previous holidays. And then I hosted Thanksgiving for 14 people. And I learned a lot this year. So I thought it was interesting. So I've added those thoughts into our conversation today. And what really struck me this year is this juxtaposition that while I have really shifted and become much more mindful and intentional about my holidays, and they are much, much better than they used to be, I still often feel potentially disappointed, disconnected, and I still often have trouble softening into the resting, relaxing, and enjoying component of it. It still takes tremendous practice for me. And so I will share my learnings and some approaches to it, but I was trying to understand in my mind why this is. And I boiled it down to it being a high expectation / manual problem with a side of compare and despair and discomfort with being the receiver, and discomfort also with the rest, relaxation, and fun, and that those are unfamiliar for us. So other factors that contribute to this are being these high achievers. We are used to being the doers and doing everything and doing it well and doing it to standards that are often very different than other people's standards. And we are also not used to being the one who just joins into the fun and the relaxing of it. And so that role for many of us brings on some discomfort. And some of my learnings have been to focus on your strengths. And so I notice, this is probably why I became a pediatrician, but when I'm attending to babies or grandchildren, like I can drop into the presence, I can drop into the fun. And that for me is a gateway into dropping into the fun with all ages and dropping into the presence of the moment with all the other things that come with family gatherings. So I did want to share what has allowed me to enjoy my family gatherings much more over the last few years. And essentially it comes down to my mindfulness practice and the mindset work that I have done through coaching. And the most important piece, I believe, is my decision and commitment to make what I call generous assumptions. And generous comes from the generosity tenet in mindfulness. And it's really telling positive stories and assuming good intent and shifting my attention, my focus to what I enjoy about people rather than what I don't enjoy about people. Even when the trigger gets set off, or even when I'll just leave it at that. It doesn't even matter what the even if or even end of that sentence is. And so I try to remember that everyone's doing the best they can and that everyone means well, generally. They're not trying to cause harm. They're not trying to upset you. They're not trying to trigger you. And that they also generally want the same things. They want connection. They want laughter. They want fond memories. It's just that you and perhaps they have different ideas about what that looks like. The other piece that has become really eminently clear to me is that many of the people who are there have not practiced mindfulness or coaching. And maybe you've suggested it, and maybe you've encouraged it, and maybe you wish that they would. But it's an unreasonable expectation that they would be as mindful and thoughtful and intentional about how they show up. And so, gifting generous assumption there and compassion, you don't have to like it, you can accept and not like it, but just gifting that they're on their own journey at their own pace, and it's not your job to change them or fix them. Your job might be to offer, to notice, um, but it isn't your job to change it. I also very much choose very specific intentions. And we've talked about that in a couple of other holiday um, podcasts in the past. And generally, they're somewhere around connection, fun, joy, and ease. And I find that focusing my intention on that and my attention on that is really helpful. It keeps me out of judgment. It keeps me out of frustration. It keeps me out of noticing what's not going well. I just remind myself, how can I focus on connection? What would bring more connection? What would be fun? What would fun do? What would joy do? What would ease do? Ease would always let it go. And gratitude is one that I brought in this year, and we mentioned it in the Storm podcast, this idea of real gratitude. But I also found it a lot easier this year, which is interesting. And so circumstances can make it easier, but it also may just be practicing. And so I noticed that certain circumstances, being an empty nester brings more gratitude for spending time with your family and your children, no matter how they show up. Having grandchildren that live afar, again, brings more gratitude. Um, Having a new place that everybody wants to come brings gratitude. And then surviving a storm brought gratitude. And I was able, as I mentioned in the Storm podcast, to tap into gratitude without the guilt this time. And I think that a huge piece of that is for me recognizing that in the past, gratitude and guilt kind of linked together.
So I wanted to reflect on the fact that you have had a lovely, cute grandchild in your life. And I'm wondering, because when you play with him, and really when you play with any child, uh, we very much go into a space of authentic, childlike curiosity with them.
Mhm.
And the mindfulness practice there is kind of subliminal, if you will. Um, but we also become so in the moment with that child. And so I'm wondering if you've been getting a lot more
Practicing.
of
Yeah.
that practice that
Yeah.
has enabled you to come to these wise conclusions.
Maybe. As you mentioned that, I actually think that's one of the reasons I chose pediatrics and love pediatrics, because I used to get it all day, every day. And that used to be the way that I would drop in. I often say, sort of dropping into mindfulness, even in a visit, is like connecting with children who are very much about presence. And it may be where my presence and attention to presence comes from, because said, children, they are present, if nothing else, present and joyful. They're not thinking ahead. They're not looking behind and regretting and changing. They're literally so in the moment, whether that leads to a temper tantrum or not. And I think they're stepping out of so many of the traps that our brain gets into, that we work on in mindfulness and coaching. They're not judging themselves. They're not judging other people. They're literally just dropping into the moment and enjoying the present. And I'm called to share this just hilarious. My grandson is now 18 months old. And those of you who've been to a retreat know Mark often wears baseball hats. And said grandchild thinks that something is wrong if Mark is not wearing a baseball hat. And he has to be sure he has his baseball hat. Um, and so he likes to take it off and on. And I have this whole video on my phone of him literally, taking the hat off and throwing it and picking it up and giving it back. But every adult in the room is laughing hilariously at this. And he's just going on. It's like a 10-minute video with the simplest thing and just giggles. And really that is what we want. If I had to sort of conceptualize what a healthy family gathering is. Nobody there was, engaging in controversial topics or noticing why they were different. Everyone was in pure presence and joy and laughter. And so finding something, you may not have a grandchild or a toddler there, and to be fair, he also had temper tantrums. but if you can just connect with what that feels like and try to bring that into wherever you are, knowing that not all family gatherings can be that way, but can you have a few more moments of that?
Yeah, so the invitation here is to use that, what Jesse just shared, as potentially some inspiration or a reminder to infuse some childlike amusement into these gatherings, like very intentionally, whether or not there are or are not children. We can still practice as if there is a child present, or we're viewing things for the first time, for instance, like a child.
And that offering, I think, is the answer to the struggle that many high achieving women in particular have, where we feel disconnected and like we're not present in big family gatherings because we're so used to the doing and we've got all this other stuff in our head. And could we, on the holidays, drop right into that childlike presence of noticing the magic of the lights and noticing the magic of the moment and noticing the funny thing, whatever it might be, if that makes sense. I think it's dropping into that childlike, we often talk about wonder and awe. That's the gateway into presence. So a few other things I wanted to mention here. I noticed some things that really worked for me over the last big family gathering we had, which was 4 days with 13 people in my space, which I've never done before. And so I did set myself up for success by teaching yoga and teaching extra yoga and teaching all those people yoga. Now they did request it, but I noticed that it actually helped everybody. Even the toddler came to yoga and the 7-year-old, 8-year-old came to yoga, and everybody was like much more calm afterwards. And so noticing how maybe you teach yoga for yourself or you still attend your yoga class, even though all the people are there. And it doesn't have to be yoga. It can be your version of something that's mindful and a break and healing for your nervous system. I also took lots of breaks. In fact, my sweet husband came up several times, like, what are you doing up here? And I was like, I am taking a break. There are a lot of people downstairs in my living room, like a lot, more double than what I usually have at a retreat. And it's been, I need a break. And he was like, oh, he was worried I wasn't okay. That tells you that this is like different behavior for me. I was like, no, I'm just hanging out up here, like with my book in the sunlight, taking a break. And so recognizing, I think, when your nervous system needs a break and having the um, ability, which I think for me is new, and I think this is why holidays go better, to notice. I'm like, ooh, I'm getting frazzled. I'm starting to get annoyed. I'm going to go take a break. And then taking breaks in nature, also really helpful. So inviting people, let's go for a hike, or I'm going. Does anybody else want to come? And in that spirit, I found the most magical place, which I'm going to mention because we're going to do Connect in Nature here next year. And they have been repairing this beautiful place called Roy's Redwoods. And what I discovered when I took my son and daughter-in-law and grandson there, because we were taking a break out in nature, is that they actually set up something called a wilderness walk. And they basically made a jungle gym out of parts of redwood trees, and it's all amidst a redwood forest. And so talk about like bringing play and wonder. And so said grandchild literally walks into this forest, and it happened before they fixed it up, right before they closed it to fix it up, and looks up because the redwood trees go up for miles. But this time he didn't know whether to look up or look down because there were all kinds of things to climb on, and they built bridges out of, fallen trees. It's really, really cool. And so taking a break with others and letting them get that break and letting nature come in to soothe your nervous system is pretty magical. And then the last bit to mention from my perspective, and I know you have lots of other tips and tricks, is for me, it's the patience and recognizing that it takes time for you to evolve as a member of family gatherings. Um, and it takes time to potentially change your expectations. And it takes time for others to evolve and or for you to accept that they're not ready to evolve yet. And so allowing the imperfectness and the progression and evolution over time is really, really helpful. And continuing to allow with grace that you still might get triggered along the way because you're still working on it. And it doesn't mean you failed, and it doesn't mean that it's never going to be fixable, which is what our brain goes to. It's just they're human, you're human, and the world is constantly changing. And I think as a setup for this year, there are lots of stressful things out there happening in the world. So everyone's going to come with their own story and their own experience and their own expectations. And so literally to expect the triggers and to let yourself know that even if you get triggered, you can take a break. Even if someone comes with some hostile story or whatever it might be, you can take care of yourself.
Which is a perfect segue into my first invitation, if you will. I'm not going to call them tips because if it doesn't resonate, then I don't necessarily want you to try. But being open to these possibilities to help invite ease into family gatherings. So, boundary. Boundary was a word for last year for me. My one of my intentions was boundary, and how funny that at the end of this year I get to test my resolve in my commitment to that word. I wanted to share a couple of quotes. So from Brene Brown, daring to set boundaries is about having courage to love ourselves even when we risk disappointing others. So having boundaries is the not antithesis, but it is pretty darn opposite of people pleasing. Um, so really thinking about what your needs are, the invitation to rest, especially when you're at capacity, because being over capacitated is not good for anyone. Also, if you have extra capacity, like beyond your human needs, for instance, looking out for potentially the needs of the loved ones who need extra care. Potentially they're from a marginalized group, for instance. And then the other and most important aspect about boundaries is how do you plan on adhering and holding yourself accountable for those boundaries? And Jessie has already invited you to participate in ways to uphold those boundaries, including taking breaks and potentially moving in a way that feels good to you. Another one is if someone throws a fit because you set boundaries, it's just more evidence the boundary is needed.
Yes.
So, having that childlike amusement, perhaps, would be a good way to respond to someone who is throwing a fit when they see you upholding a boundary. Because it's more actually reflective of them in their reaction to you taking care of yourself than it is about you. So I think it's just more evidence, um, more supporting data, if you will, that you're doing the right thing.
And I want to reflect on this disappointing others because um, it's disappointing when others get disappointed, but it's disappointing when they have a fit, but it doesn't mean you did something wrong, right? We just have this very tenuous relationship with disappointment. And for those of us who are trained in medicine, and I think also just as generally as females, if we were to disappoint people, bad things happen in our mind. And it's dangerous somehow to disappoint people. So we end up disappointing ourselves. But many strong-minded, high-achieving women, when we are disappointed, we're also the emotional leaders of our family. So then the family gathering doesn't go well. And so can we recognize that we also don't want to disappoint ourselves? And so perhaps that's the only thing in our control, is not disappointing ourselves. And that when we are happier, other people are happier. And that we can't make all people happy.
When someone is throwing a fit, it is an expression of disappointment, and it
Mhm.
might be an expression of anger and frustration, amongst many other emotions. And so when someone is throwing a fit, like for instance, if a child is throwing a temper tantrum, or an adult is throwing a temper tantrum and throwing a fit, I think, at least for me, I'll speak my truth in that I go automatically into fixing mode,
Mhm.
but it's not mine to fix, especially when what caused the fit was about my own self care, right? So I think it highlights how indoctrinated or how my prior habitual reactions to someone's fits has been uh, not so healthy. So just wanted,
Well, and I'm thinking the toddler temper tantrum. These toddlers are really, they give us a lot of important lessons. When you see a 2-year-old on the floor melting down over, I don't know, not being able to eat blueberries on the couch, for example, like that's about them. They don't like the limit. It's not about you, right? And most of us as adults are okay with that. We're not saying I'm a bad person for doing that. Or maybe they're wanting the knife on the counter, for example. Okay, we're going to let them have the temper tantrum. We're not going to judge. But when an adult or a parent or a grandparent or, anybody in your life who's an adult has the temper tantrum, we do make it about us. And so I think recognizing that a temper tantrum is always about their own inability to respond. I'm going to use the word maturely, which is a little judgmental, but respond calmly to something that they don't like. They are not able to respond mindfully with curiosity and non-judgment and patience. So perhaps it's a mindfulness issue rather than a personal judgment on you.
so the other aspect that I'm personally still working on, as of this recording, I'm going to be hosting the largest number of people ever at my home of 35 tonight for my Dragon Boat team's holiday party. I don't really know what I was thinking
It'd
when
be
I
awesome.
scared.
It's gonna be awesome.
Getting help.
Actually, can I just, before you tell us this, what were you thinking when you volunteered? Because this is gonna loop you back to your intention.
Yeah, exactly. No, that that I wanted to be helpful and that I thought that I had the space um, to share my lovely home with others. And also because I'm team captain, so I wanted to also step up. Um, and yeah, I felt
I also say
generous.
from the outside, that you're tapping into all the reasons why you should have hosted it. But I actually know you love that team
Yes,
and you love those people.
yes.
And my heart says, now I'm feeding you advice here, but I am certain you hosted it from a place of wanting to, not should.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. That you really wanted to support your team and you enjoy these humans, and they have brought a lot of light and love and exercise into your life.
A lot of and a lot of kick-assery, like my coach.
Yeah.
So
And so can I offer, I'm going to coach you here on this.
yeah, yeah,
What if that is your intention for tonight?
I love it. So inviting all of you, dear listeners who are listening to that like mini impromptu coaching session, tapping into like what the original reason was for those of you who are hosting large family gatherings soon, um, what that reason was, and to use that as an anchor, as a point of focus, um, to allow the events of the gathering to unfold as they do, because that's a lot of people, and you're not going to be able to control the thoughts and actions of all of those peoples, regardless
So
of how hard you try.
yeah, if you're hosting this from a place of love and appreciation and gratitude for your team, and probably also like excitement or enthusiasm, spend time with them.
Yes, even though with 35 people, it'll be difficult to spend time with all 35 of them.
Okay,
But
you're facilitating them all spending time together.
that's correct. I'm the facilitator, and I provide the space for the mingling.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I
but
do think this is such an important point, actually. I know I'm derailing what you were going to say, but I think this is so important because many people know I'm doing another coach training right now. And we actually had our last session this week, and someone wanted to get coached on hosting a big family gathering because they had hosted it. And they were really before they hosted it, really excited to have everyone come and felt really excited about it. And then in the end, they felt disappointed and frustrated, which is often what happens. And the idea was that there were all these stories about what it meant to have the space to host it and what it meant to be the host. And I'm feeling like this is going to help you today. But instead, tapping into your intention of being the host, you happen to have the space. You're just making it available for other humans to come and gather. Your job is literally as a space creator. And does that change potentially how you might be able to ask for help?
exactly. So, um, something that I'm working on, uh, definitely is for these event planning things, which I like doing. I was part of like the college event planning organization way back
Hmm.
when. Is that I like event planning, but I don't oftentimes reach out for help, but people have definitely stepped up and asked me what can I do, and I always take them up on something. Like it's almost like a practice or an exercise for me to delegate something that I didn't even think about delegating before, for instance. So my most recent I just keep like one upping myself. Not that this is a competition by any means, but I just had 22 people over for Thanksgiving at my house. Like you said, offering the space. And multiple family members, shout out to my cousin and my sister-in-law, offered, what can they bring or what can they do? And I definitely took them up on that. So much to the point where I actually duplicated their asks. So they both brought non-alcoholic drinks and dessert.
Okay. Yeah.
So when someone asks you how they can help, take them up on it. Just like tonight, when someone is like, what else can I do or what else can I bring? I have actually asks for them. And
Can I
um,
interject something there? This came up with a client I was working with who has a partner who has a pretty significant disability and actually needs help with things, but really struggled as someone in medicine to accept help. And one of the things that came up during that was having a list of things that could help. So she didn't have to think in the moment. It was like on her phone was a list of things that would help. And I wonder about, I believe that when we have that available, then we don't have to like get into all the energy of, is it okay to ask for help? Knowing that we're terrible at asking for help and terrible at receiving help, then it's easy to say, well, these are all the things that are needed. Does that resonate with you as well?
yes, except now I feel like I don't have time to make the list to ask for help. Because
Fair enough. Fair enough.
on us right now this evening.
Success for next
But
time.
for next time, yes,
Yeah.
that's helpful. Though I did make a list of things I needed to do before the guests started showing up. So that's definitely a step in the right direction. So in that atmosphere and that same train of thought. So if you're hosting or gift purchasing and planning in some respect for the family gathering. Like, what are some of the tasks? And as Jesse had suggested, maybe making a list of those tasks that you love to do versus the tasks that you don't love to do and maybe could be delegated. Because many would love to help.
And just because you don't love something, they might love it. For example, I love setting the table, but I don't like the cooking, right? I actually love vacuuming and cleaning. Like, it makes me satisfied to vacuum a room. Other people, not so much. You're shaking your head, right? Like, really? I love to vacuum. I love to clean things. I find it very satisfying. And so just recognizing, and actually I like to like dish up things and like make a cheese plate, but I don't want to cook anything. So it's just interesting. It's knowing what you love and appreciating that there's probably someone else out there who somebody loves going to the store and buying the drinks, and somebody else loves creating some beautiful thing. And so just letting people choose. And yes, everyone has to do something they don't love. I don't know too many people who love dishes, though I did all the dishes with all those people and I had a great time. My brother-in-law and I, neither of whom likes to cook, we had a ball washing and drying and putting things away. And so again, it can all be fun. The other thought that I want to gift you, because you have this gathering tonight, but for everyone else too, is to think, we sit here and think, well, what if this goes wrong? And what if that goes wrong? Yada, yada, yada. And my thought is, what if it's amazing? What if everybody loves it? And if you assume it's going to go well, that can give you more creativity and space to plan it. Does that feel possible?
Absolutely. And the fact is that I haven't even thought about like an aspiration for amazing. Which I think is like it's great, right? Like that I'm not expecting of that for myself or this event, and it's really uh I think it shows some growth. I'm going to give myself some credit
Yes.
here that I'm not
Yes.
aspiring
But I
for
know the
perfection.
humans and who are in your group, and it is of course going to be amazing. But if that word, that speaks to the power of words. So if the amazing word doesn't feel good to you, what if it's fun?
Oh, I know it's going to be fun.
So
Just by
pick
the sheer
something. Yeah. So just go there. What if it's fun? What if it turns out fun? What if everybody has fun? Or actually, almost everybody has fun.
It's
What if
definitely going to be fun
90% of the people have fun?
because we always do a funny gift exchange, and it's a blast. That's tradition, and yeah,
So it almost doesn't matter. You're providing space for people to have fun.
exactly.
Notice the energetic difference between that and I'm hosting 34 people tonight. I can't wait to hear about it. So, a few final thoughts as we end this episode. Um, I just want to encourage simplifying. Many people talk about lowering expectations, but simplify might be a word that resonates and gets you some of the same results. And prioritizing, which I mean by that, um, connecting with what's most important. And I think that can be a really beautiful shift in thinking about it. What's most important, as opposed to all the things, and focusing on what's in your control. And then also maybe allowing humanity is word that came to mind, allowing the ups and downs and the sadness and joy, and remembering that in all family gatherings and in literally any gathering, there's all those things. Their families and humans and important relationships are full of ups and downs. And so your holiday gathering or other important reunion, it doesn't have to be all good. In fact, it never will be, because families are meant to have all of those things. And without the downs, we don't appreciate the ups quite as much. Do you have any other thoughts you want to add in as we close?
Oh, just an invitation to uh, be present. Um, I think there's a tendency to worry about the what ifs, our negative attention bias setting in, but with everything that we've offered for you, finding your own mix of what works, what doesn't, and it could change moment to moment. But grounding back into the present moment of being with loved ones. And so our reflection questions were intermixed through this episode. So we hope that you have a potpourri of asking good questions throughout this episode.
I love that. And we've recorded an episode similar to this about navigating holidays with joy and ease. And I encourage you to take a listen to that one if you want more tips and gather wisdom from about 2 years ago. And I also have several yoga classes to prep you for big family gatherings and events. Last year, there was one specifically about approaching the holidays with family and setting yourself up for success. So if you want to prepare and gift yourself that parasympathetic break before something happens, maybe you should do that yoga class this afternoon, Yi Chang. Feel free to go to YouTube and find those. And we also encourage you to join us for coaching, for yoga, or for a retreat. All of those things will help you evolve in your approach to family gatherings and relationships and communicating mindfully in all different realms. And so take a look at our websites, and we'll put links in the show notes for all of those amazing things.
Specifically, inviting you for the Connect in Nature retreat because the link just went live and dates have been announced for Labor Day weekend for 2025. So we hope that you can join us in practicing all of these things. Also, to stay atop of what's going on as well, you can sign up for the Mindful Healthcare Collective email list, which I always include a link to an article or a practice with a theme and some tips. So hopefully you find some value in that. And then also joining us at our Facebook group, over 3,000 healthcare professionals strong.
Thanks so much for listening, and we will look forward to reconnecting with you again next week.
Thanks so much for joining us.
We encourage you to dive into the show notes for each episode for more learnings and resources.
We also invite you to take a listen to the many other Mindful Healers podcast episodes, and please share the podcast far and wide with colleagues, friends, and family.
If our message and approach resonate with you, we would love to work with you.
When you listen to a podcast, you consume information, but when you work with us, you can actually practice and change.
We offer coaching and mindfulness experiences, talks, workshops, retreats, and more. Connect with us at themindfulhealerspodcast.com.
The content of this podcast is not medical or life advice. We invite you to participate in the mindful moments we offer at the end of most of our podcasts, but please only do so safely. Welcome to this mindful moment offering, inviting you to close eyes or lower your gaze a few inches in front of you if it's safe for you to do so. Inviting you to notice a point of contact between your body and the supporting environment, like the ground beneath your feet and whatever you happen to be sitting or laying on. Next, inviting you to notice your breath at your nostrils, noticing the in-breath, noticing the out-breath, noticing the pause in between. Not trying to change the breath, but simply observing it just as it is, coming and going. Coming back to this breath. Noticing this breath. And as thoughts, body sensations, or other emotions capture your attention, you can come back to noticing the breath right now. As family gatherings sometimes bring a lot of hustle and bustle and activity, inviting you to take moments of intentional pause to simply observe what's happening and also to simply observe your breath, simply noticing it as an anchor of attention back to this present moment. As you're ready, blinking open eyes, letting the light back in. Thank you so much for practicing with me today.